I told my husband I'd never have kids. Next morning I overheard him regret marrying me. Then I discovered he sabotaged our contraception. I'm a 28-year-old woman, and ever since I was 16, I've known without a doubt that motherhood just wasn't for me. Raising kids? It never felt like something I could do mentally, emotionally, or otherwise. And I've never hidden that from anyone I've dated. From the start of every relationship, I made it crystal clear I wasn't going to have children. If being a parent was a non-negotiable for them, then I wasn't the right person to be with. Some guys were fine with it. Others weren't, and we parted ways on good terms. I never took it personally. Just because I had a specific vision for my life didn't mean I expected anyone else to adopt it. But what I've always stood firm on is being honest about what I want, and having kids has never been part of that picture. I've said it to every partner I've had, this isn't something I'm flexible on. It's not up for debate. A lot of people ask me why I don't want children. I can tell they're hoping to sway me with stories about the beauty of motherhood or the joy of raising a family. But honestly, I can't stand those kinds of questions, they feel invasive and dismissive. I don't owe anyone a breakdown of my reasons. All they need to know is that I'm child-free. That should be enough. If I'm being real, my reasons go way back and are tied to trauma I'm still working through. And I don't feel safe digging that up just to satisfy someone's curiosity. It took me years of therapy and hard work to finally feel stable, and I'm not about to undo all that by rehashing the past for no good reason. So when someone presses me about it, I don't entertain them. I either ignore the question or politely shut it down. I have my reasons, and nobody's entitled to them. Most folks have respected that boundary. So when I met my husband, David, who's 33 now, I didn't expect this topic would ever become an issue. We met 3 years ago, and not long after we started dating, I told him straight up that I wasn't going to have children. He told me he was completely okay with that, and I believed him. I mean, why wouldn't I believe a 30-something man who said he knew what he wanted from life? By the third or fourth date, I laid it all out again. I told him that if he was serious about us, he needed to understand I was child-free, completely, unshakably so. And he nodded and said he got it. After that, the topic just sort of faded into the background. It never came up again. Around our 1-year anniversary, we were having a casual conversation, and he asked me why I didn't want a family of my own. I wanted to open up to him, I really did, but it was just too much. Reopening those wounds sends me spiraling. I told him I trusted him, that it wasn't about him, but those memories were locked behind too much pain. I wasn't ready. He wrapped his arms around me, comforted me, and promised never to bring it up again. And he didn't. From that point on, the subject of kids was off the table, and I was genuinely grateful for that. I felt so lucky to have someone who respected where I drew the line. We stayed together for another year, and eventually, he proposed. I was thrilled. I loved him deeply, but even then, I paused to ask, was he absolutely sure? Because nothing about my stance on children had changed or ever would. He told me he'd never been more certain of anything. If it had been a deal breaker, he would have walked away back when we were first getting serious. He gave me this heartfelt, emotional speech, one that I thought was beautiful at the time, about how I was his entire world and that any family he wanted started with me, not a child. So we got married. It was a lovely ceremony, mostly filled with his relatives and my closest friends. I'm not close with my own family, and I haven't spoken to my mother in years, so they weren't invited. The wedding was small, sweet, and perfect. It's only been 6 months since then, and up until recently, life felt complete. We have stable jobs, live comfortably, and get along well with his family. Everything seemed like it was exactly where it should be. And now, I feel like I'm watching it all fall apart right in front of me, and I don't even know how to stop it. 2 weeks ago, everything changed. I got a direct message on Instagram from one of my siblings. I have no idea how they even found my account or why they were trying to contact me, but the second I saw it, I went into a full-blown panic. I could barely breathe. I ended up making an emergency therapy appointment because I was spiraling so fast I thought I might lose it. I was on the floor, clutching my head, gasping for air. David wasn't home, and for a moment, I thought I might actually pass out. It took hours to calm myself down. When I finally spoke to my therapist about it, I told her everything. She said the reason I reacted so intensely to something as simple as a "Hey, how are you?" message was because I had buried years of trauma so deep that just one little spark brought it all rushing back. I had never truly dealt with the pain of my past, she said, never processed it, just pushed it aside and pretended it didn't exist. And now it was demanding to be felt. She urged me to start facing it, to talk about it, if not with her, then with someone I trusted. And that's when I made the decision. I was finally going to tell David everything. I had other friends, sure, but none of them understood me on the level he did. At least, that's what I believed. I messaged him, told him we needed to talk urgently. He replied saying he was in the middle of packing for an important work trip and would be gone for a week. I realized then that this conversation had to wait. I needed time, emotional energy, and privacy to open up the way I needed to. That week felt like a year. I couldn't talk to him over the phone or send a long message. It wasn't something I could deliver without looking him in the eye. And I didn't reply to the DM either. That part of my life needed to stay closed for just a little longer. When David finally got home, I broke down the moment I saw him. I ran into his arms and sobbed like a little kid. He held me without saying a word, just letting me fall apart in his arms. Once I could breathe again, I asked him to sit down. I told him I needed to tell him everything, my story, my past, all of it. I couldn't keep it buried anymore. I told him I was the oldest of 8 kids. My dad passed away when I was only 2, and after that, my mom spiraled into depression and addiction. She was there, but she wasn't present, barely functioning, really. I pretty much raised myself. Every few years, she'd have another baby, no father in the picture, and she never once considered giving them up for adoption or even abortion. She just kept having kids she couldn't care for, and that responsibility fell on me. I was a child myself, yet somehow I became a mother to her kids. As of today, my siblings are 23F, 20M, 17F, 16M, 14M, 14M, twins, and 12F. And that's just the beginning. After my dad passed, my mom managed to keep it together for a little while. I mean, she wasn't exactly present emotionally, she checked out, but she could still hold down a job, make a meal, and make sure I was fed. It wasn't ideal, not by a long shot. There was no warmth, no affection, just the bare minimum to keep me alive. And honestly, even as a little girl, I started expecting nothing more than that from her. Then Cynthia came along. She was adorable, sweet, quiet, never fussy. I was only 5 when she was born, but Mom immediately started leaning on me for help. I didn't complain. To me, Cynthia felt like my very own baby doll. I loved playing dress up with her and took pride in helping out, changing her diapers, keeping an eye on her while she slept, just small things. But looking back, if I had known where that path would lead, I never would have lifted a finger. As time passed, Mom started withdrawing from Cynthia too, and the full weight of her care shifted to me. By the time Cynthia turned 1, Mom was already using the excuse that I was the only one who could get her to eat or calm down. And sadly, that was kind of true. Not because I had any magic powers, but because I actually took the time to be there for her. Mom simply couldn't be bothered. What I didn't realize back then was that I was being used. She took my natural kindness and twisted it into something she could manipulate. I genuinely enjoyed caring for Cynthia. It didn't feel wrong because, in my mind, that's just what older siblings did. I assumed this was normal. Then came Warren. He's 20 now, but I was 8 when he was born and Cynthia was 3. By then, Mom had fully unraveled. She told me, flat out, that I'd be responsible for him too because I'd done such a great job with Cynthia. This time, I hesitated. I had started school, I liked hanging out with my friends, and sometimes I'd bring Cynthia along. But with Warren, it all changed. My free time disappeared completely. I told her I didn't want to do it. I stood up to her, just a little. And she beat me so badly I had bruises all over my back. That's when I realized my mom wasn't just neglectful, she was abusive. And she was calculated about it too. She made sure to hit me where no one would see the marks. She used me as an example. Whenever Cynthia acted out, Mom would threaten her, say she'd hit her the way she hit me. It was terrifying, and the cycle just kept repeating. I had no childhood. I became a parent in every way except by law. I couldn't go out. I couldn't join any after-school clubs. I had to cook, clean, help with homework, keep the house together. I was a maid, a second mother, and a punching bag. And to top it off, Mom poisoned the younger kids against me. Whenever she was sober, rare as that was, she'd badmouth me, twist things around, paint me as the villain. None of them liked me, and that made everything 10 times harder. I kept going as long as I could, but when she announced yet another pregnancy, I was around 15 or 16 then, that was the breaking point. She came home one day and declared that a new baby was on the way. The whole room went silent. No one was happy. You could see it in our faces. And that triggered something in her. She went off, screaming at everyone, but especially at me. Said I had to step up again, that it was my duty. I looked her in the eye and told her no. I was done. I couldn't keep raising her children. I was tired, and it was never my job in the first place. From that day on, I stopped helping. I didn't do homework. I didn't change diapers. I didn't do anything for them anymore. The only thing I kept doing was cooking, mostly because I'd been doing it for so long and they were used to it, and because I couldn't bring myself to let them go hungry. But that was it. Once Mom realized I wasn't backing down, she started leaning on Cynthia and Warren to pick up the slack. It was a mess, but for the first time, I felt a sliver of freedom. I know Cynthia and Warren had to suffer for it, and maybe that sounds cruel, but I can't feel guilty about it. If I hadn't drawn that line, I'd still be stuck in that house, wasting my life. When the baby was finally born, my youngest sister, Mom, tried to rope me back in. She came to me with that same old tone, told me to stop being dramatic and help out like I used to. I refused again. She threatened me, said she'd stop feeding me if I didn't cooperate. I told her if she pulled anything like that, I'd report her to the authorities. That shut her up, temporarily. But then she started ignoring the baby completely. Wouldn't feed her, wouldn't pick her up when she cried. It was like living in a nightmare. And that's when I knew I couldn't do it anymore. I was 16. One night, I packed a small bag, grabbed what little money I had, and ran away. I never looked back. I called CPS the next day and reported everything. That was the last time I ever had contact with them. I didn't follow up, and they never reached out. And honestly, I didn't want to. I knew that if I opened that door again, I'd feel responsible and end up back in that same role. I needed to be selfish for once in my life, or I'd never be free. I finished school, worked through college, and slowly built a life that had no connection to that house or that family. I never talked about what happened, not to friends, not to partners. The pain ran too deep. I had been abused, used, and broken down over and over again, and I had fought like hell to survive. I had fed, cleaned, and cared for more kids than I could count. That's when I realized I'd already done my share of parenting in this lifetime. I was done. Completely, permanently done. So when I finally opened up to David and told him everything, I broke down. I cried harder than I had in years. He held me the whole time. I felt this wave of relief wash over me, something I hadn't felt in forever. My head was pounding from the crying. He carried me to bed, gave me some medicine, and I fell asleep almost immediately. That night, I felt so thankful. I thought I had a husband who truly understood me. I thought I had found someone I could trust with the ugliest parts of my past, but I had no idea how wrong I was. The next morning, I woke up and realized David wasn't in bed. I knew he had no work that day. He had just gotten back from a trip the night before, so I figured he might be downstairs. As I headed down, I heard his voice. He was on the phone with his mom. I was about to turn back to give him privacy, but then I heard him say my name. And yeah, I know eavesdropping is wrong. But something in me froze. The way he said my name sent a chill down my spine. I had shared the darkest, most painful part of my life with him. I didn't want it passed around. I didn't want his mom or anyone else knowing what I had endured behind closed doors for all those years. I stood there, trying to make sense of what I was hearing. And honestly, if he had just been telling her what I told him, maybe I could have come to terms with that. Maybe I could have forgiven it. But what he said next absolutely shattered me. It's been a few days since I heard that call, and I still don't know how to process it. He didn't just confide in her. He said that if he'd known about my past, if he'd understood how deeply my trauma was tied to being child-free, he never would have married me. He said I trapped him by not sharing everything earlier. When I heard him say that being with me was a waste of time, something in me broke. He even said he was seriously thinking about leaving because, in his words, he couldn't spend the rest of his life with a selfish woman who, according to him, had shut down her maternal instincts on a whim. A whim. As if everything I'd been through, everything I'd survived, meant nothing. I couldn't listen anymore. I'd already heard more than I could take. To him, the trauma I endured was some kind of joke, and my decision to never have kids, something I've stood by my entire adult life, was just a passing mood. I couldn't believe that this was the same man who held me while I cried about my childhood, the same man who had once looked me in the eyes and promised to love me just the way I was. And then he said I trapped him. That word rattled in my head. Trapped? I told him over and over that I wasn't going to have children. I brought it up early and often. If he wanted a big family, he had every chance to walk away. But he didn't. He stayed. He reassured me. So if anyone wasted anyone's time, it was him, not me. The worst part? A few minutes later, he came upstairs acting like everything was fine. Sweet, attentive, like nothing had happened. His fake kindness made me doubt myself for a second. I actually started to wonder if I had misheard him. But no. I hadn't. I knew what I'd heard. And now, every time I look at him, all I see is an act. A carefully constructed lie. I can't fall for it anymore. I won't. The last few days have been unbearable. I felt exhausted, isolated, emotionally drained. And the worst part is, I haven't even confronted him yet. I've just been pretending everything's normal, brushing things off when he asks what's wrong. But I know that can't go on much longer. I'm running out of strength. I still don't understand why he ever agreed to marry me. Why get into a serious relationship when he knew exactly where I stood? Part of me wonders if maybe his mother had something to do with it, but honestly, he never struck me as someone who lets others influence him. Then again, clearly, I never really knew the man I married. And at this point, nothing would surprise me. I guess I'm saying all this just to vent, to get it off my chest. I don't know whether I should confront him, leave, or just keep playing along a little longer while I figure things out. I feel stuck, completely stuck, and I need help finding a way out of this mess. Update 1. After reading through all the comments people left, I started seeing things more clearly. Some of you were right, unfortunately, horrifyingly right. David had been planning to get me pregnant all along. I haven't had the nerve to confront him directly yet, but now I know I have to. I found his stash of protection in the closet, and every single one had been tampered with. Every single one. Punctured. I can't even describe the level of rage and fear I felt in that moment. My own home didn't feel safe anymore. I didn't know what else he was capable of. All I knew was that I needed to get out. So I decided to test him. At dinner one night, I casually told him that since Cynthia messaged me and all those old wounds reopened, I'd been feeling extra anxious. I mentioned I'd had another therapy session and was seriously thinking about taking permanent steps to make sure I never got pregnant, no accidents, no surprises. He froze. I said I was looking into getting my tubes tied. And then, just to see his reaction, I added that since we're both child-free, maybe he could consider a vasectomy too. I even said his procedure would be easier and quicker, with a short recovery time. He looked at me like I'd asked him to cut off his own arm. He didn't say a word at first, but the silence said plenty. Eventually, he told me there was no need to go to such extremes. That I was overreacting. That surgery was a waste of money. He brushed it off like it was nothing. I dropped the subject, pretending I hadn't made up my mind. But in the days since, he's initiated intimacy constantly. Every single day. He's desperate. And now I know why. Update 2. I finally confronted him. I didn't plan to, but I snapped. He was pushing and pushing, trying to get close, and I couldn't take it anymore. That conversation turned into the biggest fight we've ever had. I told him I had overheard the phone call with his mom, that I knew exactly what he said. He tried to turn it around on me, saying I was in the wrong for eavesdropping. I called him out for lying to me, pretending he was okay with me being child-free while secretly planning to force me into motherhood. He denied it, of course. Said I had no proof. So I walked to the drawer, pulled out the tampered protection, and threw it in his face. He went pale. Speechless. I think he knew right then that the jig was up. I lost it. I screamed at him like I was possessed. I told him he had no right to destroy my life, to deceive me like this. He broke down, said he loved me, begged me to understand, said he just thought maybe, eventually, he could change my mind. He actually said that all women want to be mothers. They just don't realize it yet. I was stunned. Not only is he a manipulative liar, he's a misogynist too. I asked him what his plan was, since he had to have known convincing me wouldn't work. What did he think was going to happen? And then he said it. He admitted he thought that if I got pregnant by accident, I wouldn't go through with an abortion. I had no words. I stood there, completely gutted. I had hoped to prayed that he wasn't that kind of man. But that one confession told me everything I needed to know. There was no salvaging this marriage. No rebuilding trust. Nothing left. He apologized, begged for another chance, swore he'd never do anything to hurt me again. I didn't say a word. I walked away, locked myself in the guest room, and that was that. I was done. Update 3. I've moved out. The divorce papers are filed. I knew I had to do it. David, of course, refused to accept it. He kept pleading with me to forgive him, but I didn't budge. His whole family tried to get involved. They showed up unannounced, cornering me for some kind of intervention. I wasn't having it. The marriage was over. David was a liar, and I didn't owe anyone an explanation. His mom, of course, had to make it about herself. She said I was punishing her poor son for what my mother did to me. David shot her a look so sharp she actually went quiet. I told her to stay out of it. She said she was family. I told her not for much longer. Eventually, I made them all leave. They didn't want to go, but I stood firm. I've had enough of people trying to control me. I found a small studio apartment that I could afford. When I was packing up, David just stood there, stunned. I think that was the moment he realized it was really happening. He begged me one last time. Asked for couples counseling. Suggested a trial separation instead of a divorce. But I told him there was no point in dragging out a dead relationship. The only reason he wanted to save it was because he finally realized this mess was entirely his doing. Now that I'm in my own place, I just feel numb. I hope that feeling fades. I hope there's something better ahead. For now, I'm just grateful to be out of another toxic relationship. Safe, free, and finally, at peace.